Hi everyone. The callback I would like to make this week, before we start this discussion, is to Destiny and her point about how Miyazaki paints women as these strong, independent figures. She specifically uses Ponyo's mom in her example. So, despite being a literal force of nature, or Destiny describes her as Mother Nature, even. She chose to let Ponyo make her own decisions. Destiny's video made me think about the female characters from this week's readings. More specifically, just the strength that they needed to make the sacrifices that they do in their stories. And the reason that it made me think of that is because I think about the sacrifice that Ponyo's mom had to make when she decided to let her daughter make that decision of whether or not she was going to be human, because that is a sacrifice. You know, we see the entire story that Ponyo's dad is terrified of her becoming a human. And so we have to think that Ponyo's mom must have some type of fear, but instead of, succumbing to that fear and forcing her to be the fish, she allows her to make her own decisions, and that is a sacrifice. So for this week's focus, I decided to focus on the moment where the main character has to give up something to either be human or just to be with the person that they love. So starting with our first story, in Undyne, Undyne gets a human soul by marrying Huldbrand. What she sacrifices is her fate is now tied to Huldbrand's choices and actions. So it was my first time reading this version of The Little Mermaid, and I noticed that there was a big emphasis on the soul not just being a gift, but also a burden to Undyne. In Anderson's The Little Mermaid gives up her voice, which is the story we all know, and has to endure constant pain just for the chance to be with the prince and to get her soul. So unlike Undyne, it's not just the opportunity to be with somebody and to be human, but it's the opportunity to earn a soul based on her actions and decisions. And of course, The Little Mermaid that we all know, it has a very similar storyline to the Anderson one, but it is a little bit padded just because it's Disney and it's meant for kids. But, she gives up her voice. Sorry, my son woke up. Sorry about that. So where I left off, Ariel is giving up her voice to Ursula for a few days for the chance to become human and really pursue that relationship with Prince Eric. However, we see Disney leave out a lot of Anderson's more difficult themes, like the suffering and the idea about an immortal soul. Instead, the focus shifts more towards her personal happiness and following your dreams. So when we look at all three of these stories together, we can really see about how ideas about love and female empowerment have changed over time. In Undyne, sacrifice is tied to marriage and obligation, whereas in Anderson's version, it is more towards spiritual growth and selflessness. And then, of course, in Disney's adaptation, it's just a challenge that she has to overcome, not a permanent change for her. What I found interesting is that all three of these characters give up something, but they each gain something different in return. Over time, we see that as this story continues to be retold, what gets left out is the idea that love and transformation always comes at a cost. And that is this week's discussion.